Imagine moving to the U.S. from a foreign country in your late 20s. You only know a small handful of people, the language is largely unfamiliar, and your surroundings are completely new. That's how Elizabeth Keathley felt when she moved from the Philippines to Chicago in 2004. She immigrated to the U.S. on a K-3 temporary visa in order to join her American husband, John Keathley. After spending a couple years in the U.S., Keathley went to the DMV in Bloomington, Illinois, to get a state ID. While going through the process, she was asked by an employee if she would like to register to vote. And that's when all of the trouble began.
I show my passport and the visa, and then the guy asked me if I want to vote. They should ask that if you are a citizen here in the United States or something, but they said that they cannot do that to you. So my point is, I have my passport with me and my visa. Why they still ask me that question? That it's so obvious that I just, got here. I have my visa. And then he asked me to sign the paper. And then I didn't know that that paper that I signed is, I am a citizen.
That's Elizabeth Keathley describing what happened that day in 2006 when she unintentionally registered to vote. According to the National Voter Registration Act, DMV employees are required to ask people applying for a license or government ID if they'd like to register to vote. The act is also better known as the Motor Voter Law, and it was signed into law by President Bill Clinton in 1993 and took hold in 1995. Its creation intended to make registering to vote more available and straightforward for millions of Americans. Despite this, however, DMV employees are not allowed to ask about an applicant's citizenship status, because under federal law the question is seen as discriminatory. So, when asked if she wanted to register, Keathley, largely unfamiliar with the process and confused about her own rights, went ahead and signed where she was instructed to by the employee. Within weeks, her registration came in the mail and she was able to vote in the 2006 congressional election. But this action came back to haunt her when she had her final immigration interview later that year and was denied a green card outright.
The Keathleys came to see me after they had gone and navigated the process on their own mainly. They did have an attorney, I think, preparing some of the documents before, but pretty much navigating it on their own, going to a green card interview after she had arrived in this country on a temporary marriage visa and basically being laughed at for having voted. Now, when I saw them, I saw people that were just completely honest, looking to obey the law, the most down-to-earth, salt-of-the-earth people with the purest of intentions.
That's Richard Haynes, an immigration lawyer in Chicago who's practiced for nearly 3 decades. Unfortunately, Haynes says that Keathley's not alone in this scenario. He's counseled hundreds of people who have mistakenly registered to vote, cast a ballot, and then faced dire penalties. One outlet that is fed into this greater confusion is the Motor Voter Law at the DMV, which was put into place to make voting more accessible, but has instead made life harder for countless immigrants still learning how to navigate the language and laws of the U.S.
It's second nature to most Americans. You have to be a citizen to vote. It's not always second nature to the foreign national. Wait, I'm married to a citizen, so I must be a citizen, or I must be eligible, or why are they inviting me to vote? Or, hey, they sent me a voter card. After I sign that, it must be I'm eligible. So the foreign national may not have a sense that there isn't the vetting process that they thought there might be. And then they think, well, if I'm not eligible, the registration will be rejected.
But that's not the case. From a foreigner's perspective, it's hard to understand how an act that they were asked to participate in and given little guidance on can so quickly lead down a slippery slope towards deportation.
We have a person like Elizabeth Keathley who ended up showing her Filipino passport, being invited to register, thinking, why would they register me, invite me if I was ineligible, seeing I'm a Filipino citizen, then getting a voter card, thinking, well, they wouldn't have sent this to me had I not been eligible, and then voting, and then ultimately going for her interview and being turned down.
When Keathley lost her first appeal in immigration court in Chicago in 2007, she lost her job at a hospital, her medical insurance, and was faced with the very real possibility of being forced back to the Philippines.
The judge gave me the date that I need to go. So that's so hard. Oh, my goodness. I was packing like crazy, packing my clothes, packing my daughter's clothes. Oh, I'm sorry. If I can remember, it's so crazy.
It was an emotional time for the Keathleys. In 2007, the couple had just welcomed their first child together, but had decided that if Elizabeth was forced out of the country, the whole family, including John's daughter from a previous marriage, would start over in the Philippines. At that point, Haynes decided to take on the rest of the case pro bono and put in another appeal to the courts. But it wasn't an easy fight by any means. The case went on for 5 long years. In 2012, Haynes appealed the case again, but this time used a different approach based off an already accepted legal principle.
There is a defense in criminal law that says if you are invited to engage in an act, that it's at the guidance or invitation of a government official, and you relied on that act, that invitation or guidance, you can't later be penalized for acting in accordance with that guidance.
With this argument in mind, a Department of Justice immigration judge finally granted her appeal, accepting Keathley's testimony that stated she was rushed through the voter application process by an employee at the DMV and had inadvertently registered to vote with no malicious intent. Keathley says that moment felt like a huge weight had been lifted off her back.
I was so happy and thankful every day. And I'm so thankful to Mr. Henos for doing this for us. Because of him, for fighting for us, I don't know. I was going to be in the Philippines right now.
For several years, Keathley had lived with the fear that she might be forced out of her home in a matter of days or weeks. Even though she's an American citizen now, she says the whole ordeal still gives her a lot of anxiety.
You know, I'm still scared to vote, even if I am a citizen. I'm still scared, even if I am a citizen now. I'm in panic mode still.
While Keathley was exonerated, others in similar situations aren't as lucky. Haynes points to another case where he represented a woman from Peru who was in the U.S. for a few years on a green card and was also misguided while at the DMV.
I had another case with an awful result that I sought Supreme Court review of it, and it was not accepted, but I was this woman's third lawyer after she had been represented by 2 other lawyers at the lower courts. She showed up at the DMV. She already had her green card, but she showed her Peruvian passport green card and was asked, would you like to register? She asked, am I supposed to? And then the person said, it's up to you. So she checks the box saying she's a citizen, thinking that's the closest thing to being a resident, and then gets a voter card, votes, applies for citizenship, and then faces denial.
So, what can be done to prevent this from happening to hundreds more? Haynes says that the lack of clarity in the current voter registration process needs to be fixed. This means changing the clause in the motor voter law which doesn't allow government employees to ask people if they are citizens before they register to vote.
I think our country has such a sordid past with how we've discriminated inappropriately, of course, against people because of their race or their gender. We're limiting people's ability to register or to vote, and we've gone the other way of making it very liberal. And in regards to with the way our deportation laws are, they're so extreme that something has to change. And if the immigration laws aren't changing to make less of a penalty for accidental registrants or voters, something has to change with at least having more safeguards on the process to make sure that only citizens are registered.
Haynes says these additional safeguards must include a government employee's requiring physical proof of citizenship before registering a person to vote, because once someone signs on the dotted line, the consequences of their actions can be criminal.
How are the Keathleys or anybody else who are otherwise law-abiding, good people, getting whacked with the same consequences as, say, a drug dealer or a murderer might face in terms of deportation? They didn't go out of their way to register or to vote. It's the process that kind of went out of its way to find them. And for them to face a penalty because of that, it was just an extraordinary injustice. And that's our job as lawyers, to sort of spot issues that might, this is the kind of thing that, hey, Congress didn't take into account, and maybe this wasn't the intent, or here's a clash of two, say, well-intended laws.
While the federal motor voter law still remains unchanged, Keathley hopes that sharing her story will raise greater awareness that will deter others from making the same mistake, and hopefully one day lead to political change.
I feel so blessed. I feel so happy that I am able to share my story to everybody, because I know that there's a lot of people saying what I've been through.
Keathley's lengthy immigration fight has captured the attention of so many others that it's also been turned into a critically acclaimed Broadway show called The Courtroom. If you happen to be in New York City this month or in March, check out performance times and ticket info at waterwell.org. You can also find out more about the motor voter law and both of our guests, Elizabeth Keathley and Richard Haynes, at viewpointsradio.org. Also follow Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Instagram for more behind the scenes. This segment is written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
Our schedules are incredibly hectic, and with all the things we have to do, there's not enough time for the things we actually want to do. That's why it's more important than ever to find smart ways to save time without sacrificing quality. How can Idahoan mashed potatoes give you more time to spend doing the things you love? By helping you put delicious real mashed potatoes on the table in just 5 minutes. We start with 100% real Idaho potatoes from local growers, and then we wash, peel, boil, and mash them just like you would at home. After cooking each batch, we simply fresh dry the mashed potatoes so they're ready for you to prepare at home. Idahoan takes the time to create great tasting mashed potatoes from scratch, so you don't have to. Find out more at idahoan.com. That's idahoan.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
You have this wonderful opportunity to lose yourself in a creative analog task and to really focus on something and let the outside world just melt away.
The wonders of taking time to color. Then,
we doctors are the ones who are present at the most suffering moments of people's lives, and it's a gift to us.
The struggles of working in a broken system. I'm Marty Peterson.
and I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.